We've got a newcomer.
Okay, we are back for Exit.
Who dares to enter Zato 1 Arena? Zato versus Slayer. Get ready to rock. Heaven or hell. Duel 1. Let's rock.
I feel like my volumes are out of whack again. My everything sounds less loud than usual. But I'm not sure if that's my headphones or my actual computer sound. I hope that was a dot. The dot is the only thing I should see there.
Heaven or hell. Duel 1. Let's rock. Duel 2. Keep on rocking.
It's very unresponsive, my offense, right now. And this is not a game where you want to be unresponsive to offense. If you're blocking in this game, you are losing. There are some other games where if you're blocking, it's not too bad for you, but this is not one of those games. Oh, GG. He backed us like once that game, not a real Slayer player. He's yeah, I need to see more Slayer things, basically. So a lot of times the types of advice that you hear people say is like, you need to do less things that are quote-unquote good for your character. So this could be like Slayer doing backdash a lot. And a lot of times the type of advice will be, okay, you have a really good tool, but if you keep using it, you become predictable, so you can't use it that much. I think this guy has the opposite problem, where he has a good thing, and so the amount of usage that he's showing is not nearly enough for me to give it any real thought. It's a little hard for Slayers in particular because one of the best things you can do that is like a Slayer option is you have to backdash and then jump FD against my drill pressure, or my bust off pressure. But execution wise, that's a little difficult. But see, like, if you can do it, then you all of a sudden unlocked something that makes my mid-screen pressure basically worthless. Or at the very least, it will reduce the number of mixes I can do on you by, again, at least one, which is very significant. But the backdash timing is not easy, especially when you're trying to like jump cancel it. But it can be done. There's a lot of good examples of this. So it could be like a Soul player who recently started playing the game, but then he doesn't realize that it's not just a matter of getting counter 6Ps. Counter 6Ps are good, but the ways that you get there isn't just strike throw. Like there's like only one thing you can do to get the strike. You also just kind of have to abuse things that are good for your character, like to us. Oh, that should have knocked down. Notice there also that my eddy gauge was just about to run out. So if you're paying attention to that gauge, you should know that I'm either going to do something that is very drastic, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm about to do something that's very drastic in terms of trying to open you up, or I'm going to try to unsummon at you. And both are really good timings to try and either get out or mash. The burst there is less valuable because of that, because you could be doing some other things that become more likely to work out. So again, if I'm at low eddy gauge, and I'm doing corner pressure on you, as in you're blocking, you're not knocked down, in that case, it's like a very good place to try and look for a mash. Or jump out, or so. The burst you can do anywhere. Like even if I have full Eddy gauge. And then you even have a higher chance of being able to kill Eddy via the process of bursting.
Duel 2. Turn up the heat.
I feel like maybe this Slayer's goal is to wait until my Eddy gauge has depleted in terms of trying to defend against my corner pressure. But I have too many ways to reset my pressure if he doesn't do anything actively. So there needs to be some sort of realization that there is scamming going on, or else this will not ever end. This is fake and blockable.
Heaven or hell. Duel 1. Let's rock.
Here's something, which is that most pressure in this game that you see in your games are going to be fake. As in, if you just jump, like jump in FD, or jump in, if you have a normal that strings or hitbox, like Soul, JP, then jump in that button. A lot of times, it is just going to work, because most people don't have their Oki fully realized. That's kind of another issue too.
Duel 2. All or nothing.
How come 5k during pressure like that is throwable? Too much of a gap between one more and the seconds. Do you mean when I do 5k as an empty low during my pressure? Oh. That's because if I land on the ground and then press 5k, think of the time it takes for those two actions. So me landing on the ground and then doing the 5k. So you're basically waking up before the 5k becomes active. Until you're able to throw, since I'm still in 5k startup, basically. This is true for any wake-up throw against a empty low. Can Eddy not cover? Eddy, no, because if I'm on the ground already, then that means that your throw will beat my strike. That's how this game just works, system-wise. If there's a strike and a throw occurring at the same time, so if there's like a meaty projectile on you while you wake up, but then you do a wake-up throw on me while the projectile is still on you, your throw will beat my strike. Always. I see, thank you. Also, is it just coincidence that there was another Alice in YouTube chat, or is that you moving platforms? I can't tell with this chat. I see. The delay there is huge, so YouTube is, the Twitch is faster. I see. I thought Eddie could cover and you could space the MT5K and it would be unthrowable. During buzzsaw pressure, not so much. Because during buzzsaw pressure, you have to jump forwards, and you can't you don't have time to adjust your spacing with flight or anything like that during that. So you are kind of forced into that position where you get thrown when you land. Like, I'm gonna try to do it now. Oh, okay, not now. I'll try to do it now. And you can see there, like, I can't really prevent myself from being in the throw range. So you'd be right if it were the case that I could space myself, but I cannot.
Heaven or hell. Duel. One. Let's rock.
Do you guys feel like you know what's going wrong in this player's defense, or is that unclear? I'm curious. Like, do you think you can see where he's getting reset? I play Zato, and I'm the one doing the offense, so it's very clear to me. Oh, that would have killed. In fact, I'm going to point out every single time there's a reset for this game. Oh. There's a reset. There's a reset. Oh. I was not paying attention to that until just now. I'll try to continue to do so, especially when I have Eddie up. That just now, that 2S is also a reset, where you could have mashed or jumped out. That's a reset just now, the 2K, after run up. So whenever I say that that's a reset, what I mean by that is you have the option, you have enough time to either mash out or jump out, specifically. That 2K can be mashed on. To me, some things like 2S summon, walk up, and then P are a bit more obvious after time playing against Zato, but some things like having to IV 5H to make the H drill whiff aren't immediately obvious without lab work. Yeah, that's like that's a little bit more specific in the sense that it's a punish opportunity. And I guess in the sense that they are both punish opportunities, it is similar, but it's a little different because these are cases right now where he can be like the difference between doing this and not doing this is escaping pressure or not escaping pressure, as opposed to the 5H drill scenario where either way you are going to get out. It's just, are you going to get it punished on the way out or not? Which is still significant, but just a little more advanced, let's say. Yeah, you actually did a wake-up option there. That was good. That Mappa can work, by the way. He's just too slow. So if he does that properly, on time, he will punish me for doing the drill. He doesn't seem to know when pressure ends for Zato. He's way too passive on defense. Reminds me of a Street Fighter clip people used to explain why you can't just walk in the corner forever. Yeah, and Guilty Gear, all Guilty Gears, are games where it's worse than Street Fighter in that regard. It's much worse. Much worse in the sense that you can't just walk and expect to be rewarded for blocking. Like based on, and I don't know a ton about BlazBlue, but based on the little bit I've heard, it seems like BlazBlue rewards you a little bit more than Guilty Gear, relatively. But this is not a game where it's like that. Yeah, the last thing you want to be doing in this game is blocking. Like, it can be even better in some scenarios to get hit in a way that is awkward for your opponent than to be stuck blocking on the ground. Those are bad bursts. I've been told BlazBlue has strong shield OS. Yeah, likewise.
Heaven or hell. Duel 1. Let's rock. Duel 2. Keep on rocking.
Oh, I think in BlazBlue it's called Barrier, right? Shield also works if you're a melty player, I think. They call it shield, right? Oh. You can even DOT that just now, that drill. It's not guaranteed to kill, by the way. Okay, killed.
Heaven or hell. Duel 1. Let's rock.
There's resets. There's another reset. And now this is real pressure. There's a reset. Oh, we got it this time. And it's really tempting because you hear, like you see Zato on the screen, and you know that this character is really good at doing gapless pressure on you, right? So it feels intuitive that if you block enough, then you should get out, since the condition for Zato to have his gapless pressure is his eddy gauge. So like intuitively it makes sense that if his eddy gauge runs out, then you should be free. But it doesn't quite work that way because of the number of ways I can scam you to earn more gauge. These are all resets, these 5Ps. Oh. Alright, let's go. I found out recently that that combo that you do from mid-screen, the side dust, it's there's a bit of variance in it that makes it really annoying to do consistently. So I'm actually a little surprised. It's based on how soon you press 2H after the first Nobiru, and that determines the height at which the opponent will start to bounce downwards. And that affects things in a not so good way for Zato. Notice also how whenever I do the negative edge P pressure alongside 2K, so when I do like 2KP, 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 and I do run-ups in between, those are all intended to be frame traps, and note that he is never getting countered by any of those. So there is no intention. I can't see any intent for him to mash out, which works out for him in this case. The reason I'm doing that to begin with is because I think that if I'm this Slayer player, I should be mashing. That's what I think he should be doing, which is why I'm doing this to begin with. And the reason being, look at the amount of throws I'm getting right now. So it just makes sense on a mathematical perspective that if you're getting thrown this much, then you should start to tilt the scales towards either mashing or jumping or other escape attempts, right? That needs to be confirmed. That Mappa. Yeah, it's not fair you have an extra finger. You know, I didn't want a cheating allegation. So you can notice that I'm actually not using my 6th finger. I'll only pull it out during offline tournaments. There were 7 or 6 resets there before he decided to press 2P. And then the one time he did press 2P, there was no follow-up. So you see what the issue is now. Where's the defense? Wait, what? Which part do you mean? I could either mean the 6 or 7 times reset part, or the 6th finger part. That needs to be confirmed. You have an extra finger? I do not. It's an empty glove socket that I'm not using. Oh, that was kind of cool. Although, now that I think about it, I could use it as a tournament tactic, where if people that don't know me are playing versus me, I can say, or I can just show them, without making obvious that I'm showing them. I actually have a 6th finger that I can use during my matches. What's the glove for? It's to prevent grime buildup on my controller, to some degree. Which, it turns out that when you've played this game for 5,000 hours, according to Steam, it happens. And like, that's kind of a problem for controllers, actually, because you do rust your controller if there are metal parts attached to wherever you make contact with your hands. Which actually happened to my Tremba Dragon a long time ago. Like the bottom part and the top part near where the wrists contact. It damages your stick, basically. And if I had 2 of these gloves, I would probably use both. But it turns out that these are kind of expensive because they're meant for an entirely different purpose, which are for like drawing, and that requires a specific type of material, apparently. There's an OS just now. I thought you were just Zato maxing at first, IRL. Some other strats. I've seen some people who especially at conventions, cosplay their own character, or as a mix-up, they cosplay a different character from the one that they play in tournaments. I had gloves I used for fighting games. Haven't used them in a while though. Friends thought I was weird for it, keeping my shit clean. But makes sense to me. There's like my previous controller had like a very, very serious problem with that, because the entire bottom part and part of like the side that's near your body, that part was entirely metal, and so there were actually some kind of serious rusting problems. So you could have used dot there. Oh. I like the Dragon a lot. It was the heaviest controller I've ever played on. Actually, is that true? No, I think it was actually lighter than the Cross-Up, which is the Tekken controller that has both a lever and buttons. That thing, like the very first version of it, was extremely heavy, like heavier than the Dragon, which I got to try at Core Studio in Korea. And that thing, I don't know why they had to make it so large, but it was huge. And my reasoning for it at the time was because I used a lever, like I used a, I guess not traditional since it's a Korean lever, but my reasoning was that I used a lever at the time that had a very strong resistance to like sideways movement. So if I'm trying to tilt my stick in any direction, it would require a lot of force, more than, like multiple times more than any Japanese ball top lever. So if I'm handling the stick like that, with a great amount of force, then it tends to shift the stick around, unless the stick itself is particularly heavy. And so to prevent that from happening, I would prefer a heavier stick. And that was pretty good for that purpose. The only problem now is when you're traveling, or when you're like lugging it around in tournaments, it's a little less than ideal. And then now, because if you look at a hitbox, there are no forces being applied to it, mostly, other than like a downwards force, because you're just pressing down on buttons. There's no lever to move sideways. There's no sideways force, so it doesn't really require, or it doesn't really cause the stick to move sideways, which is nice. And so you don't really need a heavier hitbox controller. And that makes things like the Snapbox Micro possible, which is like a very, very ultra lightweight version of the hitbox. And for a stick, that would be not very ideal, since again, you're going to be shifting it around on your lap. But for a hitbox, not bad. Oh. The thing doesn't go away when I block. I'm also thinking of replacing my buttons, so you can see that on my hitbox right now, all of my buttons are Sanwa buttons, the red ones. The red and white ones on the right hand side. Those are all Sanwas. But I wanted to replace them with gamer fingers, but I couldn't find them at the time, and I think they're still unavailable. But I do know that I think it's Sanwa. They have these new silent buttons. I don't remember if it's Sanwa or not. But if they're available, I want to get those. So the issue is that these are 24mm buttons, and I think those are a little harder to come across for silence. Like, firstly, it's actually for stream, since I think that it's probably a little more ideal to not have so much like tapping noise going on. And secondly, because like tournament reasons, right? And I guess thirdly, also, it is a little weird to have two different button types. Like my left thumb is on my jump button, and that's the only button I have that is a gamer finger. Well, I have clicky buttons on everything that's not my jump, which is a little weird, although it's not too bad. I wonder if he knows that I'm trying to throw. Like, that round starts. He did I80 and then JD. He does get thrown if he doesn't RC there. Could have 2K'd to OTG. Look at the amount of successful throws that I'm getting every time I do go for a throw. This is a very abnormal number of throws that are successful. Oh. And then you see weird kind of mash-out attempts in places where you really shouldn't be mashing. Like after the JH there. I still don't get how people get hit by drills on wake up so much. It's harder than you might think. Because when you're playing, you just have so much else that's going on. That especially if you're not used to the idea that there's this low that appears at the end of block strings for some reason. If you're not used to playing against Zato and experiencing that, it can be hard. Like, I'm not saying that it's easy. But what I am saying is that needs to be fixed. Despite being hard. And also, yeah, there's the other possibility. The other possibility, which is that you're trying to deal with something else, but in the process of trying to deal with something else, like for example trying to IB and then IAD, in that process you're messing up in terms of execution. And that's causing you to get it by the drill. And that's a much better cause for getting hit than if you were to, say, get hit because you didn't know that the drill was going to come there. That's a very big issue that needs to be fixed. I'd say like there are 20 instances in a game, in one game. There are 20 instances where you just didn't know, or well, not didn't know. Let's say that you're trying to do that IED to try and beat the 5H drill, and you got hit all 20 times. That is perfectly fine, because your intent is to try and deal with a specific scenario, and it's just that in this case you didn't have the mechanics to be able to execute it. That's completely fine, and that's a much better scenario than if you just didn't know it, because mechanics are easy to fix. On the grand scale of things, in fighting games, fixing your mechanics is one of the easiest things in terms of improving. What's a lot harder is going to be things like conceptually learning things like neutral, or understanding new ideas that you haven't implemented yet in your gameplay. Like, those are really hard things to do. But fixing your mechanics, not so bad. So Mini's smashing in weird places. Gotta be post-strive disorder. Oh, also, yeah, there's for Slayer, specifically, there's the option, there's the possibility of just trying to backdash, but failing. If someone's trying to IB, I'm proud of them if they mess up, because I only see people who know how to defend against Eddie's auto, like 1 out of 20 matches. Yeah. And IBing, I think someone said this a long time ago. And they said something to the extent of the fastest way to improve in Guilty Gear, the fastest way, is to start IBing, if you aren't already doing so. And I don't know if it's the fastest way, but if you aren't already IBing, and you're at the point where you already have your basic Oki down, and you do it fairly consistently, there is some truth to it. Because IB in this game is very, very strong. Here's the other thing too. When you're practicing IB, like say you hear the words practicing IB. What pops into your head when you hear that? Is it like you're doing this one thing, and that one thing is gonna, in its entirety, improve your IB? Or is it like there are different types of IBing, and you want to be able to practice each and one of them? And the answer, it turns out, is IB is pretty similar to doing combos, where there are a lot of things that are like, they're universal in how they're applied. So if you keep doing a lot of combos, for multiple characters, for multiple scenarios, even in multiple games, if you keep doing them, you are fundamentally going to improve in terms of the way you can manage your timings for button presses, and just become overall better at combos. That is something you can say. But when you look at hard combos, like let's say I'm trying to do a KOF 13 combo trial that's in the game, a lot of my experience is gonna apply to that. Like I'm gonna be a lot faster at succeeding in those trials. Oh, oops. I'm gonna be a lot faster at succeeding at those trials than someone who is brand new to fighting games, right? But there's still a huge factor of, well, the mechanical requirements that this combo is spinning out for me are specific to this one combo. And so if I want to get good at this combo, then what I should do is I need to take the parts that make it difficult, like this specific combo difficult, and I should practice that individually. And IBing is very similar, where there are different scenarios in which IBing will be good for you to do. And for example, it could be like doing 5H versus Zato 5H, right? So IBing 5H is going to be a bit different than IBing something like Ino's Notes. It's going to be different from IBing Slayer's like close slash bar slash. And it's going to be different from IBing Deadman's JH. These are all going to be a little bit different. And so it turns out that just like combos, you don't want to look at IB as a whole and just think of it as one singular concept. It's more so that you take specific scenarios for IBing and you practice them individually, and that's going to help you a lot more. But do keep in mind that I said earlier, there are things that carry over fundamentally for all IBing, and so the more you do it, the better you are going to get at it. In the same way that like I'm going to be doing that KOF combo faster than a non-fighting game player. IBs are important. Oh, also, you know what else this applies to? It's negative edge. So a lot of people will look at negative edge and say, I'm not a negative edge player, I've never been a negative edge player, and I don't intend to start. But the problem with this is, again, you can say negative edge and take it holistic, like in its entirety, and imagine that if you take the term practicing negative edge and think of that as just one singular thing, it's not very accurate, because even for negative edge, there are individual combos that utilize negative edge that provide different challenges. And those individual challenges need to be dealt with on a one-to-one, or not a one-to-one, on a separate basis. You want to practice one negative edge combo, and then that let you do that combo. but it's not necessarily the case that that's going to let you do all these other negative edge combos. In the same way that like non-negative edge combos work, in the same way that I-being works. And you'll find this out very quickly when you play Zato. This does not kill. I feel like that's similar for people with charge characters. It is exactly the same. Especially when it comes to things like people who think that they're just not meant to play charge. And this is really frustrating because charge and things like negative edge, these are not like personalities. They're not something that's defined that you just happen to fit into. It's more so that they're a category of execution. They're a category of execution, and it only serves to benefit you if you try it out and like try to learn them. Every time I hear I don't like charge characters, I wonder if they've actually learned how to play a given charge character. Exactly. And again, using the same concept, one charge character and their combos using charge are going to be pretty different from another character's charge requirements. Like, think of these characters, okay? Number 1 is Leo. Number 2 is Venom. And number 3 is Potemkin. Do you feel like all of these characters utilize a different type of charge? Or are they all quote-unquote charge characters, and like learning one is gonna make you learn the other ones? And the answer is, it's very evident when you put it like that, that the charge requirements for Potemkin are going to be fairly, like, significantly different from the requirements of Venom. And what was the other one I said? I think I said May. The charge requirements for May are going to be different from Leo and Pot and Venom and so on. I think I said Leo, not May. But the point stands. Charging is fun. Yeah, charging is fun, especially in this game, because the charge required, the required time to charge is a lot shorter than in most other games. So other games you can think of like Street Fighter. Street Fighter tends to have longer charges. Under Night tends to have longer charges. I'm not sure how long Blaze Blues is, but I don't think it's that long. But I'm not sure. That could have been a Mappa just now. So if you block far drill and it's not meaty, and then I proceed to do a close drill afterwards, you can K-Mappa, and it should hit me. Speaking of Venom, I need to go learn how to actually play him, not just loop mediocre Loki. It's kind of the same for me, so I have like the very day zero basic K-Ball Oki. That's kind of it. Oh, and then imagine that if we're not speaking within the confines of one game, like think of the differences between charging in this game and charging in Under Night. Especially if you play Batista, because Batista, a character has a 4-way charge, which is up, down, left, right, or I should say up, forward, down, and back. And that kind of charge, I only know of that existing in 2 games. One is Under Night, and the other is Arcana Hearts. So it's pretty uncommon, I think. I like that you use P to get them standing again and to drill Oki in the corner. Yeah, it's like a thing that I provide you so that you get baited into thinking you can escape. And then you get hit by the drill. Because the way that a lot of people think is, okay, I'm gonna block the next thing, and then once I block the next thing, I'm gonna try to make my attempt to escape. But in this case, what I'm doing is, the thing that I'm giving them is like a very small hit that has not a lot of blocks done. So it makes them think, oh shit, it's already over. That thing that I was waiting for has already happened. I need to get out. Oh. Much better than my with Buzzsaw and lose at these strats. Yeah, Buzzsaw, every time you use Buzzsaw, there should be like a very specific purpose to it. Because it costs a lot. It's the highest cost Eddie normal you can use, or Eddie move you can use. JD might have forked there instead. I'll go to 30 with this player. If I want to burst this combo, I need to do it much earlier. It's like this, and I think a lot of people don't know this either. If you're gonna burst during a combo, you have to think of it like, what were the spots during this combo that were safe to burst? And usually when you're at the end of a combo, there are gonna have been already have been spots that have passed that were safe for you to burst in. So that choice exists between you bursting earlier at a guaranteed spot and later at a guaranteed spot. And it doesn't make any sense for you to burst at the later guaranteed spot, assuming that it's actually guaranteed. Because the two results are, you burst safely with less HP, or you burst safely with more HP. And if you look at it that way, it's always safer, or it's always better, higher value, to burst with higher HP, right? The problem here is, sometimes those aren't actually guaranteed spots. in the sense that your opponent can usually, and if they have meter, then they always have the option of hard baiting. So that has to be considered too, but this was not such a scenario.
It's not over yet.
See that? He killed Eddie and he hit me with that one burst. Why? It's one hit. Burst is one hit. Why both? He really doesn't want to mash. You gotta mash harder. Unfortunately, that's a generic advice that happens to work really well versus Zato in this game. Go to mash more. I guess the underlying issue is that a lot of people aren't confident in their decision making. But what that translates to is sometimes you need to mash. A lot of the sadness of playing Zato in this game seems to come from little things screwing him over on top of his designed weaknesses, which looks like it feels worse than just playing an obviously low tier character. Yeah, it's like I made an entire video on this, which is basically that some things stem from being low tier that cause sadness, but other things are not really tier related. It's more like things that should work, not working, like against design. And you can have a character that has a lot of those things, but is still not bottom tier, or low tier. Although in this game, I don't think there's a lot of that. I liked your point about even if he did more damage and was objectively better tier-wise, it would still feel bad mechanically. Yeah. So like take the performance of the character completely out of the question. It would still not change a thing about like the disappointments you have with the character. And like you could argue, and this is something I thought too after making the video, was you can kind of make the argument that if your character just has twice the damage, then you're probably going to run into those issues less, because you don't need to be in those scenarios as often to win the game, or like per game. But like if you take these scenarios, like take 100 of those scenarios versus 100 of another character's scenarios, and then like you start to really see that this character just feels bad. Plus our Eddie is a nerf I personally liked because he still has a lot of things from AC that are interesting options, and new options like reload, shadow, and teleport. It seemed to me like they gave every character more variety in tools, which I'm all for. It's the concept of making everyone strong, instead of trying to nerf overly strong characters and buff overly weak ones. It's just give everyone really strong tools, and like have the capacity to make that work. Which I think in Plus R is kind of... it does kind of work. Except you have characters like Zappa. Like, I'll say that I really don't like Zappa, and I don't play that game in large part due to him existing in that game, in his current state. But I'll still play Plus R, and I'll still enjoy it. Oh. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I can't recall a single time that my command throw has whiffed in the set. I agree with buffing more characters, but to me the cool part comes from giving them a variety of options, regardless if the tools are not much better. I'm gonna read that again later. One sec. It hasn't. Okay. That's a reset too, by the way. The unsummon into my Zalta button. Oh, that's a fake girl. I agree with buffing more characters, but to me the cool part comes from giving them a variety of options, regardless if the tools are that much better.
Heaven or hell. Duel. 1. Let's rock.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So like even if the tool is... It's kind of like the concept of having bad cards in a card game. Like you can have a card that is objectively low value and is just objectively straight up worse than another existing card. think he blocks. No, he doesn't. Traversing isn't good necessarily because but it's still fun to use. It does have niche uses. Yeah. Another part is just like the concept that the concept of the skill. It can be a thing where a lot of people look at it who don't play the game already and think like, oh, that's a cool concept in this game. And I think a lot of times that interest that it brings is actually going to be a huge part of why people start to play a game. Like, say you're a player that doesn't play any given fighting game, and then say that you see that fighting game, and then you notice something really cool. Like, you notice one specific move. It might not even be used that much in tournaments. But then you think, hey, this is a pretty cool move. Like, I like the concept of this move. If there's such a pull that exists in that game, you're going to be really likely to at least try it out. I think. So like, if nothing else, even if the move isn't ever used in the actual games at a competitive level, I think that like the appeal aspect of it is also pretty important. He stopped blocking low. I think I said I was gonna do 30. One sec. Okay, hold on. See, that's a good time to burst. He knows that at some point during that combo, because I did Dead Man's Hand, he knows that I want to unsummon. And if I'm unsummoning, I can't block. Are the whiffed... Hold on. Are the whiffed jump normals to catch any jump out attempts during the block string? During your block string? Which whiff jump normals? Or do you mean the JH that I do before bust law? If it's that one, it's to time the height at which I do my hits. Oh. That's the one? I see. Yeah, it doesn't actually put you at the ideal height, because the ideal height is a little lower than that. But the point is that you get it very, very consistently. Oh. It's extremely consistent at that height. And there's even a lower height than the lowest ideal height. But the reason that's not ideal is because if you're that low to the ground, the game doesn't let you jump cancel anymore. And this height you can get by doing JD. So you jump, do JD immediately, and then you can either air dash or like do a button, etc. But again, you can't jump cancel, so it's not very useful. Well, there is one use for it, which is if you're playing versus Answer, and you're doing a parry OS or anti-parry OS, then it has a use. But that's about it. I was gonna test my theory that he stopped blocking low, but my chance has been lost. Oh, yeah, that was pretty good.
Heaven or hell. Duel 1. Let's rock.
You can throw Zato there, by the way. If Zato is doing JP in the air, the JP isn't fast enough to be airtight against Ivy, so you can throw him. No tech. Okay, not teching is usually really bad in this game. That's not to say that you need to always do one sort of tech, because there's a right tech and a wrong tech. But not teching is usually wrong. That's the only one you should mix in. So you want to do like delayed techs. You want to do fastest possible tech. You want to mix between forward tech and neutral tech. You want to mix all these things, but you don't want to mix in no tech. That's pretty bad. And by the way, listen really carefully to what I said there. So there's... Oh, what's he doing? So I said that there is earliest possible tech, that's 1. There's a late... Or hold on. There's an earliest possible neutral tech, there's 1. There's an earliest possible forward tech, that's 2. There's a delayed neutral tech, 3. And there's a delayed forward tech, so that's 4. And there are different delay timings that you can put in between each of those. But already, like basically, if you look at it that way, it's a delayed or non-delayed as a binary. There's already 4 different types of techs you can do. And most people tend to stick to 1 or 2. And that's a big problem, because if your tech is predictable, you're gonna do pretty badly. As long as your opponent knows how to deal with it. My hypothesis about this player not blocking low is becoming more and more a fact.
Heaven or hell. Duel 1. Let's rock.
I'm trying to remember where this music is from. Let me see.
Duel
is quantity. Oh. I didn't think he was gonna burst that late, to be honest. Oh, I think that was the first command throw that whiffed this set. And it's been almost 40 games. And also, it would have worked if I just dashed a bit closer. It wasn't like he dealt with the throw. That's like one single thing you can change in his gameplay that would provide him by far the greatest amount of return in terms of improving win rates. Like, just change that one thing, and you will probably have won like 5 or 6 more games during the set already. At least.
Turn up the heat.
Oh. Just realized Slayer blocks with his breath, and that's what the back cloud is. Yeah, it's a pipe smoke. I don't know if you follow the lore at all. I don't either. But the entire concept of Slayer is that he's just like by far the strongest existence in the game. And when he loses, it's just because there's nothing at stake for him. I do follow the lore for some reason. All I know is that Venom has retired apparently at the end of Rough 2. I know that Soul is the original gear, whatever a gear is. And that in GG1 he tried to Justice. Is it Justice? Yeah, it's Justice. Justice tried to fight him, and then was like, "Oh, why can't I control you? You're a gear. I should be able to control all gears." And then it turns out that Soul is like the prototype gear, so it could not be controlled. He's the guilty gear, yeah. Wow, it's a bravo, Daisuke. And then also, for some reason, Zato now works for the government in Strive. But like at the same time, he's done some like... Hasn't he done some like fucking heinous shit in his life that is like worthy of being capital punishment? Also recently I remember Zato was the #1 child murderer. I see. That fits into what I thought. He's technically died once. Oh yeah. So it also turns out that in this universe, you can You can revive people. Oh, you know the best lore part about this game that I've ever found out is that in Plus R, if you play the individual character stories, they'll do like it's the same in most Guilty Gear games. So they'll have like a initial story cinematic, and then you'll have you'll play arcade mode basically, and every X number of games, it shows you like a dialogue between your character and some other characters. And then at the end, it's like, oh, this is why I'm relevant in the main story. And so for Kai's, is it Kai's? I think it's, yeah, it's Kai's story, I think. In Kai's story, he's kind of wandering around, and he meets a bunch of people who, for some reason, want to fight him. And he does this a few times. And this is Plus R's character arcade mode, by the way. So he's wandering around, he fights a bunch of characters, and then he comes across Jam. And Jam doesn't want to fight him, but what she wants to do is she wants him to come to her restaurant. But Kai says no, and then she says something like, at least drink my tea. And so Kai drinks this tea. And the problem with this is, okay, so I need to tell you something else first. In Zato, in Eddie's story, in the same game, what happens is, he fights a bunch of people, because Eddie is like, oh, I need a new host body. This body isn't good enough. I'm about to die. And so this body is like literally decaying. And so by the end of the story, the end of the arcade mode, his HP bar is actually deteriorating downwards, like it's slowly draining over time, as if I had activated IK and had waited too long without meter. That's how fast the HP is draining by the end of the story, when he's fighting Venom, I think. So that's like a very, kind of a interesting in-game application of story, right? Because your character is dying, so it makes sense that your HP is draining. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then I played Kai's story, and when you go back to that part where you're meeting Jam, and you drink her tea, it turns out that they use the exact same mechanic of your HP draining to describe the poisonous aspects of Jam's cooking abilities, based on drinking her tea. Unfortunately, I don't think that kind of thing ever happens again in this game. That was pretty cool. I like that. In general, I like when story reasons blend into gameplay a lot. That's a big pull for me for any game. Like for example, like if you have an RPG and you have a character that is supposedly very, very strong in the story, and this character that is supposedly very strong joins your party. You could just balance that character to be pretty similar to your other characters, but if you have that character just have like max HP, max attack, max defense, max whatever else, then like it makes sense from a story perspective that this character is just miles beyond any other character, like both story-wise and mechanically. It's a similar thing. It's a similar kind of thing when you have the oh, my body is decaying, so my HP is draining. Yeah, BlazBlue also has story-based stuff that disables your D button. Yeah, that's pretty cool too. But in general, especially for fighting games, I don't really care about it too much, since the main aspect of fighting games is just the competitive part. But things like this do make the game more appealing. See, it's about appeal again. Oh, close. Funny, once Zato comes back to life, The first thing he does is apparently hit the gym because I don't know how else he managed to get that much muscle from a shuttle course. You know what else? So here's another thing Eddie says in this game, in Xrd, is this is immediately after Zato revives. They're kind of like in their headspace. And Eddie says to Zato, "Okay, we're the first people to ever come back from the dead. We need to be cool." This is the exact quote. There was a cool thing in the first Darkness game, where your Darkness powers would keep turning themselves back on, as if it was taking over your body. Yeah, and like you can, and I wonder, because a lot of times you can probably justify the mechanic before you consider the story. But like in this kind of case, for Guilty Gear, the story mode, it does really seem like they consider the story first, and then fit the mechanic to work around it, since like, if you make it in the story mode, it's not really relevant as to the balancing or whatever. Well, here's another easy one, which is characters have different HP and stun values based on basically how built they are in terms of the story. Like Potemkin has more HP, has more stun value, as opposed to like a Dizzy. They're making a new Zato Hurtbox compilation. It might be a thing in the far future, but not at the moment. Oh. Ludo Narrative Sync, or whatever it's called. Yeah, I recall a similar term.
All or nothing.
He's doing a Blitz input by accident. I'm not sure what he's doing. I don't think it seems like a OS. I could have IK'd him there, by the way. The compilation will drop when he loses Frosty Fausting Grand Finals after making the sickest losers run, and bracket reset after 2H gets beat by Johnny JH. Now there's an accurate prophecy. Come on, man. Zato's not that strong by himself. He's not a... he can't actually do this. Okay, there we go. No bursts. He has a lot of meter too. See, like my health right now, just now, I had a little more than half HP in the HP bar. But that's not a lot of HP from a Slayer perspective, with both bursts and 75 meter. It's like 2 hits, including dots. He doesn't know about the IB2S 5H IDO drill. He has not shown it if he does know. But more importantly, there's just a lot of other places where I'm doing very very evident kind of pressure resets. And they're not being escaped out of. Like in the grand scheme of things, that specific matchup knowledge isn't that important. Like the IB on the 2S. Like it'll change the way I play for sure, but it's not as important as you knowing that I can't just summon Eddie during a block string and then also get pressure after. Not knowing that is much larger in terms of how it affects games. See, I don't know what that kind of blitz was, and he's been doing a lot. Like maybe it's a throw attempt?
Turn up the heat.
Yeah, they either get out or kill Eddie. If you see me do pressure for an extended amount of time, like beyond the time that it takes for Eddie gauge to naturally deplete, there's some scamming going on. And you need to find out what it is. Oh. Oh. See, I think that spot where he got hit was actually more reasonable than a lot of other spots where he got hit. Because he got hit after blocking in 5p, and he's seen in this set a lot that I tend to do 5p resets. So it makes sense. Okay, I've seen that he does 5p reset in the past during this set. I've just seen him do 5p. So I should take the gamble that he's going to reset me again. And that makes sense. As opposed to something like, well, I got hit by a drill at the end of Zato's block string for the 200th time. And it wasn't like I was trying to deal with it in some other way.
Turn up the heat.
Dots? No dots. Oh. It's too bad.
Heaven or hell. Duel 1. Let's rock.
I'm gonna do 2 more games.
Duel 2. All or nothing. Counter.
Funny that watching other fighting game streams, the streamer doesn't get me this invested in spectating their opponent's path to improvement. That's what I want to see that. Like, I want to see people take their experiences in fighting whatever character I'm playing at the time. And like, it feels fulfilling if those games cause them to change the way that they play for the better. So I'm glad that you feel the same also. And also not only for my opponent that I'm playing, but also for the people watching too. So like, if you're watching this, it would be ideal if you were to also gain from it. Like, this is something that I feel quite a bit, especially because my local scene here in Toronto, to be honest, is like not particularly a scene that is invested in improvement for this game. So if I want to fight very strong players, I don't really have the option of going offline and finding people to play against. So it's in my best interest to try and get everyone that is in my locals to improve as much as they can, so that I can also benefit from that change in environment. Oh. Whenever I do 6k, I am prepared to RC. So not a ideal spot to burst. Should have unblockable there. It's not fun beating up people who do the same mistakes all the time. I miss having a super active local. Was Ottawa super active? I guess it kind of was, right? More than Toronto at least. Can't you do IK with Hunter or something? I think in that scenario, I would have to play it back, but I don't think I consider that to be possible there. Having 3 meetups per week. Oh, I see. That's a lot. Toronto had 1 per week, and it wasn't guaranteed each week. Because, you know, at that time, it wasn't like... Even though Guilty Gear was the main Guilty Gear, the problem was that Guilty Gear itself, like the game series, it wasn't that mainstream. Or nearly as mainstream as it is now with Strive. So like the main major tournament organizers and stuff just didn't run the game. GG's, Mondo. But yeah, all the TOs that used to run games like Street Fighter V and Tekken 7, they all run Strive now too. Okay, a few quick things I wanted to go over while I'm still here. So firstly, let me pull up this. Oh, not that. One sec. This is a logo I made, by the way, a long time ago. It was for a tournament that ran on Mondays, and therefore Monday Carnival. And also, it was the 20th run of that tournament, so XX also makes sense. Isn't it amazing? Is it this one? No, it is not. Damn, I thought I was prepared. Oh, here it is. Okay. I got 2 Zato things, although I think it applies to more than just Zato. I got 2 Zato things I want to see your opinion on. Number 1, I think I asked this before, but phrased it poorly. How strong do you think sandwich pressure is? Whenever I see a commentator that doesn't know Zato, they always talk about sandwich pressure, and I don't think it's as good as they make it out to be. We can do almost the same pressure with 2K Show being the little attack that Eddie has. 2K Show Dash, and that has the benefit of pushing to the corner even on block. I think I can think of some small benefits. Eddie doesn't die if they mash/dead angle. Slightly better damage in some confirms, and a few additional mix options via slow overheads, break the law cross under. I just don't think they outweigh the fairly guaranteed corner carry. So I agree. I don't really do sandwich pressure that much, if you look at my games. And the few times I do, they tend to end very quickly. And it's because I think that the value of the type of hit you can get mid-screen. The best scenario is like you get something like this. So if I go back to game, here's the best outcome you can think of, which is a counter hit Nobiru or 2H that occurs mid-screen. So if you think about that, a counter hit Nobiru or 2H mid-screen is going to look like this. Send block. Oh, oops. So this is an example of some like fairly standard sandwich pressure. And the ideal scenario is that... Actually not this, hold on. I forgot how to do sandwich pressure. Yeah, that should work. Okay, imagine, just imagine that here, instead of the small attack, I got hit by the Nobiru, which is the big vertical anti-air attack, okay? So if I get this hit, I get something like 200 and something damage, which is pretty considerable. It's like half your HP from full HP. But I can either get a little less damage and get a knockdown. That's not the most ideal knockdown that Zato can get. Or I can get just the full damage there. I can get the 200 and something damage. And that's pretty good. And that is one of the most ideal things you want to get as Zato in your game. But I think that the alternative, which he mentioned in his post there, the alternative of like just carrying your opponent to the corner is generally a better option than trying to get value mid-screen. Now there's an exception, which is if your opponent happens to be at an HP value and an HP value like this. So let's say I'm P1, and my opponent is at this HP, where if I get a single counter hit, Nobiru, or 2H, if I get a single counter hit, then my opponent will die. Then it makes sense, because winning the round has like the maximum possible value. So this becomes a much stronger option for you to do. But if they're at full HP, or they're at an HP range that one single hit will not kill them, generally I tend to think that pushing them to the corner is better overall. So I do think that, and I hear this too, I hear a lot of commentators say like, oh, this is Zato's signature Zato sandwich pressure. This is what he wants to do. And it's kind of true, he kind of wants to do it. But he also has another alternative that I don't think is worse than sandwich pressure. So that's number one. Basically, I agree. And number two, extremely loaded, but I will try to simplify it. What do you think of when weighing knockdown versus damage in a matchup? I want to come up with a rough idea of what I want to do in most matchups. I can come up with one for most cares, but the squishy, speedy cares are where I get confused. Do we want to go for damage to min-max the few hits we get? Or do we favor knockdowns because we don't want to be in neutral? Counter 2H air combo with 50 meter, 2D versus 2K 5K in Moaru mix. So 2D here will not knock down, 2K will. And the rare grounded counter hit Nobiru are the main points I find myself conflicted on. They all lead to really good damage, except air combo where we just save meter, but neutral is really tough if it doesn't kill. So this kind of is a Zato thing, where a lot of times you have the option between a lower damage knockdown option, so the thing that you're gaining for foregoing the damage is the knockdown, or you go for the damage and you forego the knockdown. And this actually turns out kind of depends on your opponent character. So let's say, here, let me pull this up now. Where is... And I made this in advance because I thought it would take too much time. So there's this. And it turns out that it really does depend on the character that you're facing. So on the top is, and ignore the x-axis, is just only the y-axis. So on the bottom is knockdown priority, and on the top is damage priority. So if your character is high up on this list, it means that you, when you go for combos as Zato, you generally want to prefer, and I'll go a little bit more into what prefer means. You'll generally prefer combos that forego knockdown in order to do a bit more damage. And then if they're lower, you'll generally want to focus on the knockdowns more than trying to maximize damage. And you'll also notice if you look at the characters, they generally tend to align or correlate with things like HP and stun value. So Baiken, Dizzy, some of the lowest Dizzy value characters in the game. And then also like everyone here that's above this huge line, everyone in this area, they have low HP, except for Slayer. And then there are a few weird exceptions, like Slayer. So Slayer is a little bit higher up because so think of it like this. Whenever you get a knockdown, there's a certain amount of value that you get for doing that knockdown, because you get to do guaranteed Oki on them. So that Oki is very valuable. But if your character, just the character tool set that the character provides makes it so that the Oki is weaker, then the value of your knockdown is lower, because they have better tools to deal with it, right? In which case, since the value of your Oki, your knockdown, is lower, it pushes them to be a little bit higher up in terms of preferring damage over knockdown. So this would be one oddball case. But most characters are kind of in the same range-ish in terms of whether you want to value damage versus knockdown. And the only weird one here is Pot, simply due to how much damage doesn't matter as much relative to other characters, because he just has a huge HP bar, and he has a huge stun bar also. So yeah, most characters, they'll be in the similar, like this middle range, and then there are some exceptions, but most of them are kind of the same in terms of preferring knockdown versus damage. So I said prefer before, and what prefer will mean is you'll have to think of it like this. Imagine that when you play Guilty Gear, or when you play fighting games, there's an HP bar, there's a stun bar, there's a burst gauge, there's a meter gauge, but then also there's one more gauge, and this gauge is a value gauge. And this value gauge goes up whenever you, as a player, gain value. And value here is any measurable numerical metric that causes you to be closer to winning your game. So things like doing damage will increase your value gauge. Things like getting a knockdown will increase your value gauge. Making your opponent block, or increasing their risk, or making them spend their meter will increase your value gauge. And when your value gauge hits the numerical value of 100, you just win the game. Imagine that's how it works. And so, if you say for example that there's only one round per game in Guilty Gear, to make things simpler. In this case, imagine that each point of HP is tied to is tied to a certain amount of value here also. So every character has 420 HP, but imagine that there's like 4 HP per 1 value in this system that I made up. Then if you have a character that is at 30 HP, or 30% HP I should say, then this character basically only has 30% of value gauge left by their opponent until they win the game. So in this kind of case, if you have a combo that will do a lot of damage, but forego the knockdown, but it does enough damage to fill up that remaining 30 value, then that damage, turns out, is more valuable and is preferred to getting knocked down. And the opposite is true. If the opponent has 30 value gauge, or if you have 30 value gauge left, but your combo can only do a maximum of 29 value, then you will prefer the knockdown. And that's what I mean when I say that there are different scenarios upon which you will prefer one over the other. But generally speaking, like you'll prefer to go for the damage here, you'll prefer to go for the knockdown here. But also this graph is not to scale, because if you were to make this to scale, it would look something like this. In reality, it's a lot closer. In fact, it's like even closer, like this. In reality, if it's to scale. I think I messed up somewhere. Yeah, in reality it's like this. But just to make things more visible, I put them a little more spread out. Like this or whatever it was before. I guess resets also complicate the decision. Yeah, fighting games are complicated in terms of trying to measure value. The easiest example is something like this. So if you have a card game like Hearthstone, so let's say I have a and I don't know if anyone here knows Hearthstone, but let's say that I have this card, okay? And I promise it's gonna make sense, even if you don't play the game. This card costs you 4, and has an attack value of 4, and has an HP of 5. Right? So if I have this card, if I have that card, but my opponent has this card, which has a value of 3, and has an attack of 5, and an HP of 1, who gains more value when these cards attack each other? So when these cards attack each other, both cards are going to die. Because this has 1 HP, it gets hit by 4 attack, so it dies. This has 5 HP, this has 5 attack, so its HP value goes to 0. They both die. In this case, the example is really clear, because it literally tells you what value is in this game. This has a value of 3, and this has a value of 4. So when these cards make a trade, my advantage, the value that I'm getting is +1 relative to my opponent. And even this is kind of simplified, because in this game there are other factors, but broadly speaking, when these cards kill each other, by hitting each other, the person who had this card gains value because they spent, like, the cost of this card was less, and they got to remove something of higher value. In the same sense that if you are playing Guilty Gear, so if you're playing Guilty Gear, and you are able to, for example, let's say bait a burst. Let's say that you blocked a burst. That's something that cost my opponent a lot of value, because burst is very valuable in this game. But for me, all I had to do was, like, let's say that I did 2D. Let's say that I did 2D into Break the Wall. That's something that is like a cost of 0, basically, or a cost of 1. And for my opponent, it's like a cost of 10. So by using my very low cost option, I was able to beat my opponent's high cost option, which is very, very valuable for me. And this is like a clearer example, and there are a lot of other factors that play into a lot of other scenarios. But this plays throughout the entire game, no matter what it is. So every single interaction that you have in this game, whether it's you get a knockdown, so let's say I get a knockdown. This knockdown for me, as long as I do my proper Oki, this knockdown, and this Oki, has a very high value also. I'll see you around. I'm also done soon. And then other things like just killing your opponent outright. If I just do enough damage to kill my opponent, that will be the highest possible value thing I can do in this game. And there's all sorts of small and large value things in between. Okay. But did I answer the question? Hold on. Oh, there's another factor too, which is if I am playing versus someone who I know has very excellent defense, and so they're going to be able to deal with my Oki a lot better, I'm also going to tilt my decision making towards doing a little bit more damage as opposed to getting the knockdown. That's another thing too. Because if my opponent, the better my opponent is at defense, so imagine that my opponent is actually an AI. They're like a Tazbot, and they're able to just have inhuman reactions to all my defense, so they can just block everything. In that case, my offense is not really going to be that valuable, because every time I get my Oki and run my Oki, they're just going to block everything. So the few times I'm able to get my hit in, I shouldn't be trying to go for Oki in that case. What I should be doing instead is I should be maximizing my damage every single time, the few times I manage to get a hit in. It probably makes a lot more sense that way, or to describe it that way. But yeah, so it's dependent on the character, number one, as shown here, or not here. As shown here. It does depend on the character a little bit, and it also depends on your opponent, in terms of how well you think they'll deal with your pressure / Oki. So pot is like... Pot is... Oops. Pot is lower here. Yep. Okay, I think that answers it. I'm done. I need to go play Maple, as usual. So, thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon. Also, I have a Discord for notifications. Will he be on tomorrow? I think it's likely. Yeah, I think it's likely. Okay, goodbye. Thank you.